$3,500 budget versus a $35,000 budget when creating a music video. Having sworn off creating music videos for the gazillionth time last summer, I've already gone ahead and directed another 2. In this video, I'm going to be sharing the details of both with you and take a look at the differences between them. I played a number of roles on both productions, and although the larger budget had many more people involved, that didn't necessarily mean that I had any less hats to wear. Also, we'll take a look at where the smaller budget missed out on, where the budget went, and what I would have liked to have done differently. Ow, 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 ow. Take the camera. The 4K music video was another collaboration with my good friend Ash Riley. A year ago, we worked on this project with the talented Claudia Kazaya with a very similar budget. Ash hit me up again at the start of the year, saying that Claudia was up for another one, this time in a film noir style. It was the film noir style that had me hooked. That, and having worked with Claudia before with Ash, I knew that she'd trust us and be open creatively. Ash and I started by having a chat on the phone about a few early ideas and references, before doing something that I've not done before in a project, but thought it could be a good way of us working collaboratively and conveniently. Very simple, but I set up a shared notes, threw some thinking points in there and a few reference images, and it worked out really well. As we had a couple of months until we were actually shooting, this allowed us to think about the video and work on it as and when it suited our individual availabilities. We didn't even end up actually putting together a treatment, as this sort of served as that. Ash invited Claudia to the party for her input, and she shared various outfits and props she was sourcing herself. I also used it effectively as a more organised WhatsApp chat when discussing all things video. We divided up the to-do list. Ash and I had a few phone calls to catch up on where we were at now and then, but for the most part, this was a seamless, smooth, slick operation in terms of pre-production. For the most part. We were back in Ash and myself's old reliable studio that we must have shot in at least 3 or 4 times now, the recently renamed Your Studios in South London. We chose this studio for 2 main reasons. 1, because it was very much affordable within our budget, and 2, because we could fit a car inside of it. Like all great shoots, the day started off with a big old dose of stress that I calmly crushed down into my stomach whilst building the camera, as Ash went to help our gaffer and all his kit, as they were having trouble getting to the studio, as his vehicle wouldn't start. I was outwardly zen about the delay, which by the way meant they were over an hour late to set with kit. But fortunately, we did have Claudia's other half acting as production runner, which was super helpful for us to make up some of the time as he went off to collect a few bits we needed, as well as sorting lunch for everyone. We were already not scheduled for a lunch hour on this shoot as a result of the short shooting hours we had in the studio, so it was already going to be tricky to find time to eat. On a bigger shoot, this would have been an absolute no for the cast and crew, but as there were so few bodies on the shoot, we were able to get away with it. Not usually a way I like to work, as it's physically draining on myself as much as the next person, especially when I'm operating and playing the role of DP as well. On the shoot, we had a total cast and crew of 7. 9 if you count the studio manager and owner of the classic car we were renting. 1 talent, Ash and myself, director, cinematographer, producer, Sparks, art department. Lighting by Joe, Dana, the makeup artist, Joe, Claudia's mister, runner in essence, and a behind-the-scenes photographer in the trusty Finn, who also lent a hand moving or packing down things here and there. I genuinely really enjoyed this shoot. I felt like we worked really well as a team, more so than previous jobs of this scale and nature. And despite our delayed start, we got through the day super efficiently and with a bunch of shots I was super happy with, given the restrictions. The edit was over to Ash. He went back and forth with Claudia and myself over a number of months before handing it over to me for some cleanup work and the final grade. How was the budget carved up? Ash and myself each took a fee of 500 quid for our time, which, as we all know, was a lot more than just the shoot day, either side. Our gaffer and his kit, lighting by Joe, also took £500. I incredibly generously donated all of my kit, which would normally hold a rental value of around £830 for the day, for nothing. The location cuts a deal considering we were shooting on a Sunday, paying just £600 for the whole day in the studio. Ash didn't get paid for his edits, I didn't get paid for the VFX time and the grade. I did charge back the cost of the couriers getting my kit to and from location. The classic car we rented, including fuel, cost us £370 for a few hours. There was the projector and a small pot for props and dressing. So much like the video we did over a year ago now for Claudia, this was only really possible because we simply weren't being paid for a lot of our time. Everyone's giving it their all, really just for the love of it. It was a fun project that we wanted to be part of and use it as an opportunity to try out a few ideas. The intentionally fake feeling projector shot didn't come off exactly how I pictured it, but I'm still happy-ish with what we all managed to achieve. In a stark budget contrast, let's now look at the 35k video, approximately £30,000. It began with a phone call from my friend Marcel, a music promo for an artist he co-manages that I'd worked on the previous summer, cramming 2 music videos into one day and calling in all the favours, as is all too often music video tradition, only to then discover that the artist, who, granted, is an independent artist, well, let's just say that they have substantial financial backing. With that in mind, along with the optimistic but unrealistic mindset of I'm only doing music videos from here on out if they're not shit, whether that be in the quality or final product, somewhat, yes, but mostly I mean not calling in all these favors for labels and musicians and giving my time and resources for cheap or even worse, free. The expectations have been far too high for many years now. The industry is booming busy, and especially if they have the money, then they can pay the going rates. So I was on board for this new music video, with the understanding that we'd have a much better budget than last time. I was adamant I'd be paying everyone in the crew full APA rates. Lunch would be tasty, and I'm getting paid for my time and every role I play. The video was as fairly straightforward in the way of concept as it gets from my side of things. Performance-based and centered around dance. So the bulk of the prep work fell to our lead talent, as well as the amazing choreographer Richard Marcel and his team of incredible dancers to get the dance down and nailed in less than a week, of which contained just 2 rehearsal days for the dancers. My first and biggest mistake on this job was when asked about availability just 2 weeks before shooting, committing to a singular shoot date based around everyone else's availabilities before securing a decent producer, as I hadn't factored actually producing the video into my already full work schedule. Which is ultimately what ended up happening after the 3 different producers I reached out to all came back saying that they'd sworn off music videos for life.
Work is so busy and it's just not worth the hassle.
Even though I'd assured them rates would be good, they still weren't interested. I've got to say that I massively admire the resilience in turning down a well-paying job in favour of their own well-being and mental health over a stressful music video. So I set about using any spare moments I had in and around other shoots and edits to produce the thing myself. It was, as always, an unnecessarily stressful addition to my life in the 8 days between signing up to do the job and shooting it. But now that I'm on the other side, I guess it wasn't so bad. I did a very loose treatment based on the small brief I'd been given, so that it could be shared with the relevant people as the next week unfolded. The first and easiest thing I checked off the list was camera kit. Thanks, CameraWorks. Legends. Then my 2 biggest challenges in pre-production quickly followed. Neither of my 2 usual gaffers were available, and I needed to secure a location that was big enough for the dancers, had character enough so we didn't have to spend too much on art department, was ideally already fully blacked out or wouldn't require too much manpower to do so, was within Greater London so we didn't have to waste time and money on getting crew places, had space for hair, makeup and wardrobe, as well as most importantly being available on the singular date that we had to shoot. And for no more than £3,000, which might sound like a lot, but location houses are really expensive these days, and particularly hard to negotiate with when you're looking for something so particular and so close to the time. So already we've spent the whole of the other video's budget on a location cost alone. Still wearing my producer hat, I put some feelers out amongst cinematographer friends asking for gaffer recommendations. I booked the rest of the crew, reached out for a bunch of catering quotes, put a shout out on the socials for a runner for the day, and hounded 5 separate location companies trying to get a response on a bunch of different locations. Were they available? Could they make it work for the budget? Then on the Tuesday, less than 3 days before we were actually shooting, whilst I was in the middle of nowhere, without my laptop, without Wi-Fi or 4G, I get a call from the choreographer.
What's the floor going to be like in the location? As they can't do this sort of dance multiple times on a concrete floor, as it will destroy their feet and knees.
2 things very important to a dancer. Let me ask you this. When was the last time you shot in a warehouse or studio that didn't have a concrete floor? I was straight on the phone to the art director, as I needed them to secure as industrial looking as possible rubber matting and underlay that we could cover a large scale enough space for the dancers to do their routine on. Regardless of paying everyone right and asking for more money to cover the additional costs that were thrown at me, I still had to work within a budget. So we didn't get as much flooring as I'd have ideally liked, and the art director hadn't been budgeted an assistant to get this flooring down and secured in time. So I assured her she'd have both the runner and myself on the day to help make it happen. On this dreaded Tuesday, I remind you less than 3 days before we're actually shooting, I still hadn't signed a contract for the location. Later that day, I secured a gaffer I'd been recommended. Now wearing my cinematographer hat, we spoke at lunch, and I was immediately encouraged by his level of on-itness. He was also on a lunch break on his own shoot, and unfortunately neither of us had any availability or time in our schedule before Friday to actually recce the location. So there was a slight level of uncertainty, but the location managers answered all my questions over email, and I'd seen a bunch of images of the space, so felt pretty confident about it. At the end of that day, when I'm back in my hotel room from this other shoot, having been shooting since sunrise, I get a call from both Marcel and Richard, the choreographer. The first day of dance rehearsals have gone really well, but they've now decided that they want to include the taps and claps from the dance in the final mix of the actual track. So I'm going to need to organise some wooden tap boards and a sound engineer, all for Friday. In between problem solving and having something tasty to eat in the hotel at the end of a very long day, I then stayed up too late working on a call sheet before confirming final details in the coming days. As I headed back south to London on the Wednesday evening, most things were in hand, and the pressure-inducing anxiety wasn't too intense, as I only had catering and music playback left to confirm. Lighting had come in a little higher than I'd hoped, but I could still make it work within the budget. Then I got a call on the motorway from Marcel.
I need you to transfer me £350 now for the dancers' outfits.
But I haven't even got the upfront payment through yet. And what's this extra you're talking about? When we spoke on the initial call, you said that wardrobe wasn't falling into my budget. Still on the motorway on the drive back to London, an hour later, I get another call.
One of the dancers needs a hotel room booking for tonight in London. Long story. I'll explain later. Can you sort now?
Fortunately, the legend that is Nathan Chong was riding shotgun in the van and kindly donated his travel time to sorting this for me. Thanks, Nathan. The next morning, back at my desk for 24 hours, I confirmed and paid for catering. And after several failed attempts at renting a PA for playback, due to a lack of availability, I decided to buy a powerful speaker for honestly not all that much more than it normally costs to rent. Next day delivery was out of the equation, but I found a place that sold what I needed just down the road from the studio we were shooting in. So I asked them to keep something aside for me and I'd be there to collect as soon as they opened the next morning. The call sheet was sent out, the van was mostly loaded, and I went off to bed for an early night's sleep. The shoot day itself went overall positively. That is to say that we got what we needed. But there were plenty of challenges along the way to achieving that. The first was down to the lighting rig. Having not been able to recce, it wasn't until going to hang the first truss that the gaffer discovered that the structure he and his team were planning on hanging it from was not exactly structurally sound. No matter, he had a solution and had already made a call to sort it out before bringing the problem to me. And the lighting rental company were already on their way with what we needed to make it work. An absolute dreamboat of a collaborator. It wasn't as ideal as the setup we were going to have, as my safe shooting area would now be narrower, but Art did a good job of trying to give me a bit more space to work with, and it meant that we could now shoot into the corner of the room, rather than having to shoot straight lines, so every cloud. I operated a Ronin for the day. I would have preferred to have had a steady op, but again, some budget constraints had to be kept, otherwise I would have ended up not getting paid for some of the work I was doing. Lunch was absolutely banging, albeit quite late, as everything had fallen a bit behind on account of having to wait for the new lighting rig to arrive and be built. Sound recording took longer than I would have liked, eating into our already late running schedule, and it was taking some of the talent a while to nail a few parts of the routine. So putting down the Ronin, I switched between director and DP hats to the producer one to run and find the location manager to confirm overtime rates before speaking to all of the crew and dancers separately to confirm everyone was happy to do another hour, which wasn't as tricky as it might have been on some other shoots, as we were already doing a shorter than average day, so everyone was graciously on board. We did hurriedly shoot 2 additional vocal setups, which I wanted to nail, but because we were up against it, it quite frankly just looked a bit I knew there and then it wasn't good enough to make the edit, so called it a wrap, we all packed down and headed home. In comparison to our smaller budget, we had a lot more crew for this one. Would have still loved a whole lot more to have made this a lot easier, utilise our time and make the whole thing better, but the line had to be drawn somewhere. We ended up having a total of 28 people on set, and you can make that 29 if you want to include the location manager. 1 lead talent, 9 dancers, 3 musicians, a choreographer, a director, cinematographer, a producer, all-round legend, a first AC, a gaffer, 2 sparks, an art director, a runner, a sound engineer, hair, makeup, stylist, caterer, management, and the artist's personal assistant, which comparatively to our smaller budget is substantially more hands on set to help. I planned to get a much better music video editor than myself on board for this one, so I'd budgeted for 2 days worth of edits. But after the 2 that I reached out to both weren't available, and following having taken 4 hours of my time to sort and sync the footage by eye, as we'd had a problem with getting sound into the camera while shooting, I felt like I'd already done half the battle, as there was only so much flexibility to be had in the edit due to the choreography structure, and following that, the limited takes of when everything and everyone was doing the right thing. So rather than carrying on looking for an editor, I just did it myself because it made life easier. Once the edit had been signed off, it went over to the talented Carol Cebulski at Cheat for a beautiful grade. The location ended up costing a hefty £3,500 after overtime and parking was added to the bill. Camera and kit rental also came to a little over £3,500. Our largest expense by far came with the dancers and choreographer, costing £11,500, which included all their rehearsal time, designing the dance, costume, and then bonus hotel expenses. The crew were all paid APA rates, including myself, who received a paycheck as a cinematographer with a sweetener of an additional £1,000 as the commissioned director, and a reasonable fee for my production hours. I finally made a decent return on a stress-inducing music video. If we'd had more money for both and hadn't been restricted by the availability of the cast and crew for the large budget video, then what would I have done differently? For the smaller budget, I would have loved to have had more setups for variety. a dedicated art department with substantial build time to create some set builds and a decent colorist on board would have really boosted this to the next level, as well as getting everyone paid properly and having a lunch break. Lunch is always good. For the larger budget, an entirely different location with the necessary wooden flooring rather than the less than aesthetically pleasing rubber matting we'd have to pull together. We had talked about dressing it with some sawdust, which could have looked cool being kicked up in the routine. But then, as well as being a reset nightmare, there was also some health and safety concerns raised. Alongside the crew additions already mentioned, I would have loved to have had more rehearsal time for the on-screen talent. A full pre-light day so we could have had more additional setups, a larger safe shooting area, and more time on camera. In both of these types of videos, I really feel that variety is key. And we were definitely lacking in that, but the line had to be drawn somewhere.
Thanks for watching. If you like budget comparison videos, then you should definitely check out this one here. And if you still haven't, make sure to subscribe for more semi-helpful tips and interesting insider industry knowledge.